My name is Cora Ashworth, and at 32 years old, I find myself standing in the corner of my parents' sprawling Atherton home, a glass of champagne trembling in my hand. The air hums with the curated perfection of my brother Julian's engagement party. It's a scene from my childhood, polished and amplified, minimalist architecture warmed by the glow of 1,000 tiny lights, the soft murmur of conversations about venture capital and IPOs, and the clinking of glasses held by people with impossibly white teeth. In the glittering constellation of my family, I have always been the dark matter, felt but unseen, my presence a quiet, gravitational pull of disappointment. My father, Edward Ashworth, taps a silver spoon against his crystal flute, the sound cutting cleanly through the ambient noise. He is about to announce a surprise gift for Julian and his fiancée, Isabel. A gift, I will soon learn, of $2 million. His next words, however, will be a gift just for me, a shard of glass meant for my heart. Of course, we'd love to do the same for Cora, he will say with a practiced, benevolent smile, but, well, art doesn't exactly pay for a mortgage in the Bay Area, does it? In that moment, a part of me will shatter. But across the room, past the sea of designer silks and bespoke suits, my grandmother Genevieve's eyes will find mine, and in their depths, I will see not pity, but a storm gathering. Before I tell you what happened next, what that storm unleashed upon our carefully constructed world, I need to take you back, to show you the landscape of my life, a place where worth was measured in stock options and success had only one, very narrow, definition. Growing up in the Ashworth family was like being raised in a meticulously designed greenhouse. Every element was controlled to produce a specific, high-yield outcome. My parents, Edward and Helen Ashworth, were the architects of this environment. They had taken a modest family inheritance and, with breathtaking ambition and ruthless efficiency, built Ashworth Sterling Holdings, a private equity firm that reshaped skylines and corporate landscapes across the West Coast. Their success story was a legend in the financial world, a testament to what they called the Ashworth Doctrine: unwavering focus, strategic aggression, and the complete absence of sentimentality in business. Inside our glass and steel home, which felt more like a modern art museum than a place for skinned knees and messy feelings, that doctrine applied to everything. Ashworths don't just participate, they dominate, my father would declare at our formal Sunday dinners, his gaze inevitably landing on Julian. Julian, 2 years my junior, seemed to have been born with the Ashworth Doctrine encoded in his DNA. He was the perfect yield from our family's greenhouse. By 6, he was coding simple programs. By 10, he was winning regional science fairs with projects on algorithmic trading. By 14, he was captain of the water polo team, a straight-A student, and had already mapped out his path to Stanford, followed by a seat at our father's right hand. His side of the house was a testament to his achievements: trophies for athletics, plaques for academic decathlons, and framed certificates from prestigious summer camps, all arranged with geometric precision. Your brother understands the mechanics of impact, my mother would tell me, her voice a smooth, cool surface I could never get a grip on. The subtext was always clear, and you, Cora, do not. It wasn't that I was a rebellious child or a poor student. I was simply different. I operated on a different frequency. While Julian saw the world in numbers and systems, I saw it in light and shadow, color and form. The gnarled branches of the ancient oak tree at the edge of our property held more fascination for me than any stock chart. The way the late afternoon sun slanted through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust motes in a golden haze, felt more profound than any of my father's lectures on market capitalization. I lived in my sketchbooks. I spent hours by the creek that ran behind our estate, trying to capture the dappled light on the water, or in my room, mixing watercolors to replicate the bruised purple of a twilight sky. Art was the language my soul spoke, a way to make sense of a world that otherwise felt alienating and cold. When I was 12, my middle school art teacher, a kind woman named Mrs. Gable, submitted one of my paintings to a countywide youth art show without my knowledge. It was a simple watercolor of 2 hands, weathered and old, loosely holding a small, sprouting seed. To my astonishment, it won first place. The local paper, the Palo Alto Chronicle, printed a small, grainy photo of it. I had never felt a pride so pure, so entirely my own. That same weekend, Julian's robotics team won the national championship. My parents threw a lavish party for him, filling our home with their influential friends and business partners. My small, blue-ribbon certificate from the art show sat on the kitchen counter for 3 days, gathering a fine layer of dust, until our housekeeper quietly placed it on the desk in my room. "I saw your little picture in the paper," my mother said a few days later when I finally mustered the courage to ask if she'd seen it. "It's good to have a hobby, Cora. It keeps you occupied." A hobby. That's all it ever was to them. The only person who spoke my language was Genevieve, my father's mother. Grandma Genevieve lived in a modest, book-crammed bungalow in Berkeley, having steadfastly refused my parents' repeated offers to move her into a sleek luxury condo in the city. "All that marble and glass gives me a chill," she'd say with a dismissive wave of her hand. A house should feel like a hug, not a handshake. Genevieve had been an anthropology professor at UC Berkeley before she retired. In her home, surrounded by overflowing bookshelves, woven tapestries from her travels, and the constant, comforting smell of Earl Grey tea and old paper, success wasn't measured by financial portfolios or corporate takeovers. It was measured in curiosity, in kindness, in the courage to live a life that was true to one's own spirit. "This painting has a soul, Cora," she told me, holding the newspaper clipping of my winning artwork as if it were a precious artifact. "It tells a story without a single word." Never, ever let anyone convince you that's not a form of power. When I would escape to her house, usually after a particularly bruising lecture from my mother about applying myself, Genevieve would make me cinnamon toast, no matter the time of day, and she would listen. She'd ask about the colors I was using, the feelings I was trying to convey, the stories I saw in the world around me. "The world needs quiet beauty just as much as it needs loud ambition, my love," she'd remind me. Perhaps even more. By 16, I was worn down by the constant, unspoken disapproval at home. I began a futile and exhausting campaign to mold myself into someone my parents could recognize as a success. I joined the debate team, forcing myself to argue points I didn't believe in. I enrolled in AP Macroeconomics, a class that felt like trying to read a foreign language in the dark. I even dated a boy named Chad Prescott, the son of one of my father's private equity partners, whose primary topics of conversation were his father's yacht and his golf handicap. The ultimate act of self-betrayal came during my senior year. I was accepted into the California Institute of the Arts, CalArts, with a generous scholarship. It was a dream I had barely dared to articulate made real. But after weeks of my parents' relentless campaign of gentle guidance, "Artists starve, Cora. We gave you every advantage, not so you could waste it on finger painting. Think of your future, your security." I turned down CalArts and accepted my admission to Stanford's economics program. "Finally, a sensible decision," my father had said, clapping me on the shoulder. It was the most potent dose of approval I had ever received, and it tasted like ash. Julian, of course, went to Stanford as well, graduated at the top of his class, and was immediately installed as a vice president at Ashworth Sterling Holdings, where he became the heir apparent my father had always envisioned. I graduated from Stanford with a respectable GPA, but with a profound emptiness that shadowed me into adulthood, a persistent, nagging feeling that I was an imposter in my own life. 10 years after college, my life was a stark counterpoint to the Ashworth success narrative. Instead of a corner office with a view of the bay, I rented a small, second-floor apartment in Oakland's Temescal district. Not the newly gentrified part with the Michelin-starred restaurants and artisanal cheese shops, but a few blocks over, where the rents were still just about manageable for a working artist. Yes, an artist. After 3 soul-crushing years at a consulting firm where the only thing I excelled at was stifling panic attacks in the bathroom stalls, I had finally found the courage to quit. I had saved meticulously, taken night classes at the San Francisco Art Institute, and slowly, painstakingly, clawed my way back to my first and only love. My parents were, predictably, appalled. "It's a phase," my mother had declared during one of our brief, stilted phone calls. "You'll grow out of it when you realize you need a real career." My studio was my living room, where a large, north-facing window provided the steady, forgiving light I needed for my mixed-media canvases. My work explored themes of connection and isolation, nature and artifice, the things I felt most deeply. I'd had some modest success, a few pieces in a small gallery in the Mission, a handful of commissions through my website, but financial stability was a distant, shimmering mirage. What gave me a deeper sense of purpose was the community program I had started 8 months earlier. I called it the Oak Seed Collective. Twice a week, I transformed my small apartment into a free art studio for kids from the neighborhood, many of whom came from families struggling to make ends meet. Watching their faces light up as they discovered the magic of mixing colors or shaping clay, I felt a sense of rightness, of impact, that my old job had never provided. "You can't build a legacy with glitter and glue, Cora," my father had said with a dismissive chuckle the last time I'd mentioned it. Just last week, my fragile professional confidence had taken another blow. Galerie Lefebvre, a prestigious space in San Francisco I had been courting for months, had finally reviewed my portfolio, only to send a curt, form letter rejection. I had allowed myself a dangerous sliver of hope that this might be my breakthrough, a piece of validation tangible enough to show my parents that my path, while different, had merit. Mark, the tech product manager I'd been casually seeing for a few months, didn't understand why the rejection had hit me so hard. "It's just one gallery, babe," he'd said, scrolling through his phone as I tried to hold back tears in his sleek, minimalist Soma loft. "The art world is subjective. Just pivot and disrupt your submission strategy." Mark didn't know about the complex, tangled roots of art, worth, and family that made up my emotional ecosystem. Our relationship was a thing of convenience, a temporary bridge between his world of agile sprints and my world of solitary studio days. Still, his company was a pleasant distraction, and he seemed to find my bohemian artist vibe, as he called it, charmingly novel. When the invitation to Julian's engagement party arrived on thick, cream-colored cardstock, the A of the Ashworth family crest embossed in gold, my first instinct was to burn it. Julian was marrying Isabel Moreau, whose family had made their fortune in biotech. It was the ultimate merger, a strategic alliance my parents must have dreamed of. "You have to go," Mark had said, as if it were that simple. "They're your family." Easy for him. His parents were retired teachers in San Diego who sent him care packages of homemade cookies. I stared at the invitation for a week before finally texting my RSVP. Some masochistic, hopeful part of me felt compelled to go, to witness the celebration of my brother's perfect life, perhaps as one last, definitive confirmation of everything I was not. Finding something to wear was an ordeal. My closet was a sea of paint-splattered denim and comfortable cotton sweaters. Nothing screamed Ashworth Sterling Holdings engagement party. After a full day of scouring consignment shops in the city, I found a simple, elegant black silk dress that looked surprisingly chic after I carefully steamed out the wrinkles. "Just try to find some common ground," Mark advised the night before the party, as if decades of complex family dynamics could be solved with a simple conversational gambit. "They're probably not as critical as you remember." Before leaving my apartment for the drive across the Bay Bridge, I performed my pre-family gathering ritual. I reread a small bundle of letters from Grandma Genevieve, tied together with a faded silk ribbon. Over the years, she had been my constant correspondent, her elegant, sloping script filling pages with encouragement, book recommendations, and gentle wisdom. "Your path is your own, my dear Cora," she had written after I told her I'd quit my corporate job. "Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the act of creating something beautiful and true in spite of it." On the drive to Atherton, watching the gritty, vibrant murals of Oakland give way to the manicured, sprawling estates of the peninsula, I felt myself shrinking. The confident, independent woman who ran the Oak Seed Collective began to fade, replaced by the 16-year-old girl, desperate for a scrap of approval she knew would never come. The Ashworth estate was unchanged, a monument to controlled perfection. The long, winding driveway was flanked by perfectly spaced olive trees. The house itself, A starkly beautiful composition of glass, concrete, and cedar seemed to hum with a quiet, intimidating power. Gardeners had planted thousands of white orchids in minimalist planters for the occasion. Everything was pristine, curated, and spoke of a wealth so vast it had become an abstraction. My mother greeted me at the door, a vision in a steel-gray dress that perfectly matched her eyes. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. A diamond necklace, a gift from my father for a recent acquisition, glittered at her throat. "Cora, you came." She offered me an air kiss, her cheek cool and smooth. Her eyes did their customary, lightning-fast scan of my appearance. "That dress is simple. We have a few minutes before most of the guests arrive if you'd like to find something of mine." "This is fine, Mother," I said, my hand tightening on my small clutch. "Congratulations on Julian and Isabel. He's on the main terrace with the Moreaus. Perhaps run a comb through your hair before you go out? The fog on the bridge seems to have made it a bit wild." Not 5 minutes, and already found wanting. I navigated my way through the house, past the living room with its white sofas no one ever sat on, through the dining room where the long table was set for 50 with Danish silverware and impossibly thin wine glasses. Glass walls slid open to reveal the expansive terrace, where Julian stood with his arm around a stunning woman in a pale green dress that probably cost more than my car. "Cora." Julian's face broke into a smile that seemed, for a moment, genuinely pleased. "You made it." We shared the awkward, one-armed hug that had been the hallmark of our relationship since we were children, a gesture of proximity, not intimacy. "This is Isabel," he said, turning to his fiancée. "Isabel, this is my sister Cora." Isabel Moreau was even more beautiful up close, with warm, intelligent eyes and a smile that reached them. I braced myself for the polite, dismissive condescension I was used to from their world. "I am so happy to finally meet you," she said, and to my surprise, she took my hand in both of hers. Her grip was warm and firm. "Julian told me you're an artist. I was an art history minor at Yale. I absolutely adore the Bay Area art scene. I would be thrilled to see your work sometime." Her interest felt authentic, a stark contrast to my mother's little picture and my father's glitter and glue. Before I could form a proper response, my father appeared, clapping Julian on the back. "There's my son. The Radcliffes just arrived. Come and say hello. Isabel, your mother was just asking for you." He gave me a cursory nod. "Cora, good of you to come. Your grandmother is looking for you. She's in the library." As they walked away, I overheard my father murmur to Julian, "Ken Radcliffe is on the fence about the Portland waterfront deal. Be sure to mention the revised profit projections." I retreated back inside, weaving through the early arrivals. They were faces from my past, my parents' friends and business associates, but none seemed to recognize the adult version of the quiet, awkward Ashworth girl. In the library, with its floor-to-ceiling shelves of unread, leather-bound books, I couldn't find my grandmother. I did, however, find my Aunt Susan. "Cora, my goodness, is that really you?" she asked, squinting at me. "Still doing that painting thing? Your cousin Michael just made partner at his law firm. 31 and already so established." I nodded and smiled, scanning the room for an escape route. This would be the rhythm of the evening. A relative or family friend would ask about my hobby, then immediately pivot to a detailed report of their own child's conventional, measurable success. "Are you seeing anyone? No? Well, you have time. Still living in Oakland? How adventurous. Have you thought about teaching? At least you'd have a pension." From across the house, I could hear my mother's voice, clear and proud, rising above the party's hum. Julian conceptualized the entire Austin Tech campus project. 32, and he's already managing a portfolio larger than most boutique firms. Needing a moment of quiet, I slipped upstairs to my old bedroom. My parents had long since converted it into a minimalist guest suite, erasing every trace of the teenager who had covered the walls with postcards from museums and her own charcoal sketches. On an impulse, I opened the walk-in closet. Tucked away on a high shelf, behind a stack of neutral-toned guest linens, I found a forgotten portfolio. My high school artwork. My mother must have stored it away instead of throwing it out, an act of either residual sentiment or efficient tidiness. I wasn't sure which. I pulled out a charcoal self-portrait I had done when I was 17. The girl in the drawing stared back at me, her eyes wide and uncertain, but with a flicker of defiance in them. You always did have a way of seeing right to the heart of things. I turned to find Grandma Genevieve in the doorway, looking elegant in a simple cobalt blue dress, her cloud of white hair pinned up loosely. At 84, she moved with a new, careful slowness, but her eyes were as sharp and perceptive as ever. Grandma. I crossed the room and hugged her, inhaling her familiar, comforting scent of old books and lavender. She held me at arm's length, studying my face. Let me look at you. There she is. A little buried under the weight of expectation, perhaps, but my Cora is still in there. Her gaze seemed more intense than usual, tinged with an urgency I couldn't quite place. Stay strong tonight, my love, she said, patting my cheek. Things are not always as they appear. Before I could ask what she meant, my father's voice echoed from the house-wide speaker system. If all our guests could please make their way to the main terrace for a special announcement. Genevieve took my arm, her grip surprisingly firm. Shall we go and face the lions together? Downstairs, the party was in full swing. 150 people now filled the house and terrace, a glittering sea of power and influence. Julian and Isabel stood at the center, the radiant suns around which everyone else orbited. My parents moved through the crowd with the practiced ease of monarchs, my mother's laugh tinkling strategically, my father's hand clasping shoulders and sealing deals. I found a spot near a large, sculptural olive tree in a pot, hoping to remain part of the scenery. From there, I could observe without having to engage, a skill I had perfected over a lifetime of Ashworth family functions. My father's voice, amplified by a small microphone, cut through the chatter. Friends, family, esteemed colleagues, he began, his CEO voice resonating with confidence. Helen and I are so thrilled to welcome you tonight, to celebrate not just an engagement, but a union of two truly exceptional families. My mother stood beside him, her smile a perfect, static curve. It was a smile I had studied my whole life, one that never quite reached her eyes. When Julian told us he'd met someone special, my father continued, we were, of course, intrigued. When he told us that someone was Isabel Moreau, we were ecstatic. A wave of appreciative laughter rippled through the crowd. Not because of the Moreau name, of course, though it certainly doesn't hurt. More laughter. But because in Isabel, we see the same drive, intelligence, and grace that we have always admired. Isabel blushed prettily, while Julian looked at her with an expression of pure adoration. They were a perfect picture, both tall and fit, radiating a kind of effortless confidence that comes from a life without obstacles. Julian has surpassed every hope we ever had for him. My father's voice swelled with a pride that was almost palpable. Stanford, top of his class, and now the driving force behind Ashworth Sterling's most profitable quarter to date. He understands legacy. He understands impact. He understands what it takes to build something that lasts. I took a large gulp of my champagne, the familiar burn of resentment rising in my throat. Every family gathering featured some version of the Ode to Julian. I had learned to dissociate, to mentally plan my next painting or a lesson plan for the Oak Seed Kids. And it is in that spirit of building, my father said, that Helen and I wish to announce a special engagement gift. This snapped me back to the present. My parents were generous with Julian, but their gifts were usually discreet, a quiet transfer of stock or a new car. A public announcement was a power move. Son, we know you and Isabel have been looking at properties, trying to decide between Pacific Heights and a place down here on the peninsula. My father's smile broadened. To help you start your life together on the right footing, your mother and I are giving you a gift of $2 million toward the purchase of your first home. A collective gasp, followed by impressed murmurs, swept through the guests. Julian looked genuinely stunned. Isabel's parents, standing nearby, nodded with serene satisfaction. A worthy dowry for their daughter. With Ashworth ambition and Moreau ingenuity, my father concluded, we expect nothing short of greatness. I suddenly felt dizzy, the champagne turning sour in my stomach. $2 million. An amount so vast it was almost meaningless to me, given as a party favor. Then, my father's eyes scanned the crowd and found me, cowering by my potted tree. His expression shifted, the benevolent smile tightening into something sharper. "Of course," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the terrace, "we'd love to do the same for Cora." The crowd's attention swiveled to me. I felt 100 pairs of eyes land on me, pinning me in place. But, well, art doesn't exactly pay for a mortgage in the Bay Area, does it? He delivered the line with a light, self-deprecating chuckle, as if sharing a charming family joke. Some people laughed along with him. Others offered me quick, pitying glances before looking away. My Aunt Susan shook her head with a look of profound sympathy. The world tilted. He had actually said it. Out loud. He had taken my life, my passion, my small, hard-won world, and held it up for public ridicule, dismissing it as a quaint and profitable failure. I couldn't breathe. The crystal flute felt impossibly fragile in my hand. I needed to leave before I shattered it, or myself. With a dignity I didn't feel, I set my untouched glass on a passing waiter's tray and walked, not ran, walked, toward the house, my heart hammering against my ribs. The downstairs powder room, with its slate walls and single, perfect white orchid, offered a sanctuary. I locked the door, leaned against the cool stone vanity, and finally let the sobs come, silent, racking shudders that shook my whole body. Art doesn't pay for a mortgage. The words echoed in the quiet room, a final, definitive judgment on my life. It wasn't just that he thought it, I had known that for years. It was the casual cruelty of it, the way he had used my life as a punchline to elevate my brother's. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were red and swollen, my cheeks flushed, my hair a mess. I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. What was I doing here? Why did I keep answering the summons, returning to the scene of my original inadequacy, hoping for a different outcome? Why did a part of me, even now, still crave a single drop of approval from a well that had always been dry? I could just leave. Walk out the front door, call a ride, and be back in my Oakland apartment in an hour. I could block their numbers, delete their emails, and disappear from their world for good. A soft, hesitant knock on the door made me jump. "Cora? My love? It's Genevieve. May I come in?" I took a deep, shaky breath and unlocked the door. My grandmother stood there, her face a mask of love and concern. She stepped inside and clicked the lock behind her. "Your father," she said, her voice laced with an old, weary anger, "has always mistaken cruelty for candor." Fresh tears welled in my eyes. "He's not wrong, though, is he? By his standards, by their standards, I'm a failure." Genevieve took my hands, her skin as soft and thin as parchment, her grip surprisingly strong. "Their standards, my dear, were broken long ago." She guided me to a small, upholstered bench and sat beside me, her movements slow and deliberate. A small wince of pain crossed her face, so fleeting I almost missed it. "I've never told you the full story of how I came into this family," she said, her voice low. "Perhaps it's time you knew." She told me about her life as a young anthropology student, falling in love with my grandfather, the heir to a modest but respected old-money San Francisco family. His parents had considered her utterly unsuitable, a bookish academic with no social standing and dangerously progressive ideas. My grandfather had to defy his family to marry her, creating a rift that never truly healed. "When your father was born," she said, "I swore I would raise him differently." I thought I had. As a boy, Edward was sensitive, imaginative. He loved to draw, you know. He was much more like you than like Julian. I stared at her, stunned. I had never, not once, heard this. The family mythology had always painted my father as a born capitalist. But when your grandfather died so suddenly, Edward inherited everything at just 26. Something in him shifted. He became obsessed with proving his worth to the ghosts of his grandparents, with building the fortune into an empire they could never have imagined. Her voice grew heavy with a sorrow that felt ancient. "By the time you were born, he had fully embraced the very values I had tried so hard to protect him from. I have stood by and watched him do to you what his family did to me, Measure a person's soul with a balance sheet. She shifted on the bench, and this time the wince of pain was more pronounced. "Grandma, are you all right?" I asked, a new, sharp fear cutting through my own misery. I noticed now a faint sheen of perspiration on her brow and the slight tremor in her hands. She waved my concern away, but her hand went to her abdomen for a fleeting second. She reached into her small evening bag and pulled out a delicate, lace-trimmed handkerchief. "Cora, there is a reason I am telling you all of this tonight. There is something you need to know." Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "I have pancreatic cancer. The doctors have given me a few months. Maybe less." The slate-gray walls of the room seemed to close in on me. The air grew thick and heavy. Not Genevieve. Not my rock, my champion, my one true north. "Why didn't you tell me?" The words tumbled out, frantic and desperate. "Does Dad know? What about treatment? We can get other opinions, specialists, clinical trials." "Show my love," she soothed, patting my hand. "I have made my peace. At 84, one cannot complain about a long and beautiful life." "Yes, your father knows. In fact, that is part of why I am doing what I am about to do." She explained that her diagnosis had brought a fierce, clarifying focus to her life, especially regarding her estate. Everyone, including my parents, had always assumed that Genevieve lived modestly because she had modest means. The truth, she revealed, was far more complex. "Your grandfather, bless his defiant heart, left the entirety of his estate, the investment portfolios, the original family properties in the city, directly to me, not in the family trust your father controlled. While Edward inherited the business and the seed money to build his empire, I inherited the roots of the family tree." She smiled faintly. "I've lived simply because it's my nature. But my estate, my dear, is considerably larger than your parents have ever imagined." My mind was reeling, struggling to absorb this new reality. 3 weeks ago, Genevieve continued, her eyes holding mine, "After watching your parents continue to praise Julian's every move while dismissing your beautiful, courageous life, I met with my attorney. I made some significant changes to my will and my trust." She took a slow, deep breath. "Now, Cora, I need you to do something very difficult. I need you to dry your eyes, hold your head up high, and walk back out there with me. I need you to stand by my side while I make an announcement of my own." A jolt of fear shot through me. "Grandma, no. Please don't. You don't have to cause a scene for my sake." "Oh, my love," she said, and for the first time, I saw a flash of the fierce, defiant young woman who had married into the Ashworth family. "This isn't just for you. This is for me. I have been silent for far too long." With a strength that seemed to come from pure will, Genevieve stood and offered me her hand. "Shall we?" Together, we walked out of the powder room and back toward the terrace. The party was still buzzing, the shock of my father's announcement having already been absorbed into the general hum of celebration. My parents were in a tight circle with the Moreaus, smoothing over any potential awkwardness with practiced charm. Genevieve walked directly to the small, low stage where the string quartet had been playing earlier. She ascended the 2 shallow steps with careful, deliberate movements and took the microphone my father had left on the lectern. I stood at the foot of the stage, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "If I may have your attention for just one more moment," Genevieve's voice, though not loud, carried a quiet authority that sliced through the noise. The conversations faltered and died out. All eyes turned to her. My father's smile froze on his face, his expression clouding with annoyance. As the matriarch of this family, Genevieve began, her gaze sweeping over the silent crowd. "I have had the great joy of watching both of my grandchildren grow. We have heard Edward's perspective on their achievements tonight. Now, I would like to offer mine." The air crackled with a new tension. This was not on the evening's agenda. "Success," she said, her voice clear and steady, "is a curious word. For some, it is measured in dollars and acquisitions. For others, in status and influence." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "I have always preferred a different metric. I measure success in authenticity, in courage, and in the quiet, profound impact of a life lived with purpose." My father took a half step forward, as if to intervene, but a look from Genevieve stopped him cold. My grandson, Julian, has indeed achieved great things in his chosen field, and he has found a wonderful partner in Isabel. For this, I am deeply and truly happy." She smiled warmly at them. "But tonight, I want to acknowledge my granddaughter Cora's success as well. A success that may look different, but is no less profound." Every head turned toward me. I felt my face flush, but I stood my ground, my grandmother's strength a current running through me. "While Cora's path has not been the one her parents laid out for her," Genevieve continued, "she has built something of immense value. Not only has she cultivated a true and powerful artistic talent, she has used that gift to create the Oak Seed Collective, a program that offers a lifeline of creative expression to children who might otherwise be forgotten." A murmur went through the crowd. This was news to them. "It is for this reason," Genevieve said, her voice gaining strength, "that I am making an announcement of my own tonight. I have recently revised my estate plans." My father's face was now a thundercloud. "Mother, this is neither the time nor the place." "On the contrary, Edward," she replied, her voice cool as steel. "You chose this public forum to make a financial announcement concerning one grandchild. I am simply balancing the ledger." The silence that followed was absolute. While Julian and Isabel will of course be well remembered, the vast majority of my estate will be used to establish the Genevieve Ashworth Foundation for Community Arts, with Cora as its founding director. A collective, audible gasp rippled through the party. My mother's hand, holding her champagne flute, froze in midair. "The foundation will secure a permanent home for the Oak Seed Collective, fund scholarships for aspiring young artists from underserved communities, and expand its reach throughout the Bay Area." The initial endowment, Genevieve said, her eyes finding mine and holding them, will be $18 million. The number landed in the room like a physical object. $18 million. "Because true legacy, Edward," she concluded, her gaze now fixed on her son, "is not about the bottom line. It's about the lives you touch and the authentic story you leave behind." She placed the microphone back on the lectern, turned, and slowly descended the steps. She took my arm, and in that moment, under the shocked and silent stares of 150 people, I felt a lifetime of shame and inadequacy fall away, replaced by a quiet, fierce, and unfamiliar pride. The moment Genevieve and I stepped away from the stage, the curated calm of the party shattered. A low, excited buzz erupted as guests turned to each other, whispering furiously. My parents, their faces pale masks of fury, were immediately engulfed by a concerned-looking Julian. Isabel's parents exchanged panicked, uncertain glances, clearly recalibrating the value of this family alliance. "Grandma, I don't know what to say," I whispered, as we navigated through the sea of curious stares. "You don't have to say anything, my love," she replied, her voice calm, though I could feel a slight tremor in her arm. "I've been wanting to make that speech for 30 years. Before we could find a quiet corner, Isabel broke away from the family crisis huddle and hurried toward us. Her expression was not one of anger or confusion, but of something I couldn't quite decipher, perhaps. "Mrs. Ashworth," she said to my grandmother, her voice full of genuine admiration. "That was incredible." Then she turned to me, her eyes shining. "Cora, I had no idea. A community arts collective? That is absolutely amazing work." Her sincerity was a balm on my raw nerves. "Thank you," I managed. "It's small, but the kids are extraordinary. I'd love to visit." Seriously. My senior thesis was on the social impact of arts education in urban communities. Before she could say more, my mother materialized at her elbow, placing a possessive hand on her arm. "Isabel, darling, your parents are asking about the dinner seating. There seems to be some confusion." Her voice was tight, her smile a painted-on grimace. She shot a look of pure ice at my grandmother and me. "Genevieve, I believe some of the guests are trying to congratulate you. Cora, your father wants to see you. In his study. Now." The old, familiar command sent a jolt of Pavlovian fear through me, and I started to obey. But Genevieve's hand tightened on my arm, a silent, firm anchor. "Actually, Helen," my grandmother said, her tone deceptively pleasant, "Cora and I were just stepping out for a breath of fresh air. I'm feeling a bit tired. Edward's concerns can wait. My mother's perfectly sculpted eyebrows shot up. It was the Ashworth equivalent of a jaw drop. No one, defied a direct summons from my father. I insist, Helen said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. As do I, Genevieve replied, her own smile never faltering. Come, Cora. As we turned to leave, I saw Julian watching us, his face a complex mixture of emotions. For a split second, our eyes met across the room. I saw no anger, no resentment. I saw something that looked, astonishingly, like envy. We were almost to the sliding glass doors when he caught up to us. Grandma, can I have a word with Cora? Just for a second, he asked, his voice low and urgent. Genevieve studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. I'll be on the terrace, my love. Once she was out of earshot, Julian raked a hand through his perfect hair, a gesture of anxiety I had rarely ever seen. Cora, I need you to know, he began, using my childhood nickname for the first time in years. I had no part in what Dad said. It was disgusting. I'm so sorry. His apology, so direct and unexpected, left me speechless. Thank you, Julian, I finally said. But you don't have to apologize for him. Yes, I do. He glanced over his shoulder at our parents, who were now in a tense, whispered conversation with Isabel's. What Grandma did, damn. That was something else. A small, watery laugh escaped me. That's one way to put it. Cora, he hesitated, his voice dropping even lower. I don't know how much longer I can do this. Do what? This, he said, with a vague, sweeping gesture that encompassed the party, the house, our entire life. The golden boy. The heir apparent. The whole damn show. The confession was more shocking than Genevieve's announcement. Julian was the one who thrived here, the one for whom all this was built. What are you talking about? You're the best at it. You're Dad's prodigy. I'm miserable, he said, the words stark and unadorned. I have been for years. I wanted to be a marine biologist, remember? All those summers at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. I did remember, dimly. A brief passion in high school, quickly extinguished and forgotten. I had assumed it was a passing phase. Dad said that wasn't a path for an Ashworth, Julian continued, a bitter edge to his voice. So I did what was expected. I always do. But watching you tonight, hearing Grandma talk about an authentic story, it landed. Before I could respond, my father's voice boomed across the room. Julian, the Radcliffes are leaving. Come and see them off. Instantly, Julian's face shifted, the mask of the confident young executive snapping back into place. We'll talk more, he promised, before turning and striding back into the heart of the party. I found Genevieve on a stone bench on the terrace, gazing out at the meticulously lit gardens. Is everything all right with your brother? She asked as I sat beside her. I'm not sure, I said honestly. He's not who I thought he was. Good, she said with a small, satisfied smile. Perhaps the truth is finally starting to crack the foundation. She patted my hand. Now, shall we go and face the Inquisition? The door to my father's study was ajar. He was standing behind his vast, imposing desk, a monolith of polished teak. My mother was perched on the edge of a leather armchair, her posture rigid. Mother, my father began, his voice tight with controlled rage. What you did out there was a reckless, sentimental, and deeply damaging act. Was it? Genevieve asked mildly. I thought it was rather clarifying. This isn't about your feelings or Cora's, he snapped, with a dismissive glance in my direction. This is about the fact that you turned a private family matter into a public spectacle. A spectacle you started, Edward, when you decided to publicly humiliate your daughter, Genevieve retorted, her voice losing its gentle quaver and hardening to flint. I was stating a fact. Cora has consistently refused to engage with the legacy this family has built. And there it was again. The conversation about me, as if I were a piece of furniture. But something was different tonight. I was different. It's not some charity project, I said, my voice quiet but clear. The words seemed to surprise my father, who turned to look at me as if just noticing my presence. It's an educational program. And the kids I work with matter. Their stories matter. "You don't understand how this works, Cora," he said with weary condescension. "This fortune, this family, it's a single entity. My mother's misguided gesture undermines the entire structure." "The gesture, as you call it, is final," Genevieve interrupted. "The foundation is established. The documents are signed. Unless you want to contest the will of a dying woman and drag the Ashworth name through a very public and very ugly court battle, I suggest you find a way to accept it." My father's face was flush with a dark mottled red. "We will discuss this tomorrow, when you are thinking more clearly." "There's nothing left to discuss," I said, and the words felt like my own, born not of defiance, but of simple truth. "Grandma made her decision, and I am going to honor it." My mother stood up. "We have guests. This conversation is not over." "Actually, Helen, it is," Genevieve said, rising slowly from her chair. "Cora is going to drive me home now. Please make our apologies." And against all precedent, against a lifetime of conditioning, that is exactly what we did. I walked my grandmother out of that cold, beautiful house, leaving my parents standing in stunned silence in the study. We got into my slightly dented, 10-year-old car and drove away from the glittering estate, leaving one version of legacy behind to begin building another. 3 months after the night that cleaved my life into a before and after, I stood in the middle of a vast, sun-drenched space in a converted warehouse in West Oakland. The air smelled of sawdust and fresh paint. Contractors were installing gallery lighting on the high, exposed beam ceilings. This was the new, permanent home of the Genevieve Ashworth Foundation for Community Arts. Genevieve's endowment had been transferred immediately, allowing us to act with a speed that felt breathtaking. The Foundation's first acquisition was this building, with its soaring ceilings and industrial-paned windows, a place with enough room for multiple classrooms, a real gallery, and studio spaces for artists in residence. "What do you think about putting the children's gallery right here, by the entrance?" Genevieve asked. She was directing operations from her wheelchair, a tartan blanket spread over her lap. "I want their work to be the very first thing people see." Her health had declined swiftly, the cancer relentless and aggressive. But her mind was a razor, her spirit a bonfire. She was involved in every decision, from the color of the walls to the curriculum for our expanded programs. The freight elevator rumbled open, and Julian and Isabel emerged, carrying blueprints. They had become, to my continuing astonishment, my most steadfast allies. "The signmakers are here," Julian announced. "They need to confirm the mounting points on the facade." In the weeks following the party, Julian had begun a quiet revolution. He was still at Ashworth Sterling, but he was using his influence to steer the firm towards socially responsible investments and sustainable development projects, much to my father's chagrin. Isabel, true to her word, had joined the Foundation's board of directors, her expertise in both art and nonprofit governance proving invaluable. "Cora, I had an idea for a partnership with the local senior center," Isabel said, unrolling a floor plan. "We could create an intergenerational mentorship program. Pair our kids with retired artists." As they talked, I glanced at Genevieve. She was watching them, a look of profound satisfaction on her face. She caught my eye and gave me a slow, deliberate wink. My parents had retreated into a state of cold, formal silence. After their lawyers confirmed that Genevieve's trust was ironclad, they ceased all attempts at intervention. The one crack in their wall of disapproval had come 6 weeks earlier. My father had shown up at my old apartment unannounced, looking lost and out of place amidst my canvases and jars of brushes. "Your grandmother was always stubborn," he'd said, not looking at me. "Just like you." It wasn't an apology, but it was, I realized, a concession. A recognition of a quality in me he had once only seen in her. It was the closest to a peace treaty he was capable of offering. "Earth to Cora." Julian's voice broke my reverie. "The contractors need to know. Sliding partitions or fixed walls for the classrooms?" "Sliding," Genevieve and I said in unison, and we both smiled. The next few weeks were a blur of frantic, joyful work as we prepared for the Foundation's grand opening. Genevieve's condition worsened, and a hospital bed was moved into her Berkeley bungalow. But she was adamant. She would be at the opening. "I may not get to see the forest this will become," She told me one afternoon as we reviewed portfolios from emerging artists for our inaugural exhibition. But I will be there to see the first seed planted. And she was. She arrived by private ambulance, attended by a nurse, and held court from her wheelchair in the center of the gleaming new gallery. The space was filled with a vibrant mix of the Bay Area art world, local community leaders, the press, and even a few of my parents' curious business associates. My parents themselves made a brief, obligatory appearance. "Your grandmother looks exhausted," my mother said to me, her eyes scanning the room. "You should be prioritizing her comfort over all this." "This is her comfort," I replied, my voice even. "She chose this." Later that evening, when the crowd had thinned, I found myself alone with Genevieve in front of the wall we had dedicated to the Oak Seed Kids. Their paintings and sculptures, so full of raw, uninhibited life, seemed to glow under the new lights. "Do you know what I see here, Cora?" she asked, her voice a fragile whisper. "What, Grandma?" "Possibility," she said, her eyes shining. "Pure possibility, before the world tells it what it's supposed to be." She reached for my hand, her grip surprisingly warm. "It's what I always saw in you." 1 week later, Genevieve passed away in her sleep. At her memorial, held not in a cavernous church, but in the main gallery of the foundation, my father spoke formally and briefly. Then, to my surprise, Julian stood up. He spoke not of Genevieve the matriarch, but of the grandmother who had secretly bought him a microscope for his 10th birthday and encouraged his love for the tide pools, nurturing a part of him our parents had tried to prune away. "She saw us," he finished, his voice thick with emotion. "She saw who we really were." In the years since, the foundation has grown into something more beautiful and impactful than I had ever dreamed. We have given scholarships to dozens of young artists, created arts programs in schools all over the city, and our gallery has become a vital space for voices that might otherwise never have been heard. Julian and Isabel, after a long engagement, were married in a small, simple ceremony on the coast, a world away from the Atherton estate. My relationship with my parents remains a quiet, complicated landscape. But last month, my mother visited the foundation. She walked through the gallery, her gaze lingering on a powerful series of portraits by one of our scholarship students. "Your grandmother would be proud," she said, just before she left. It was not an embrace, but it was, perhaps, an open hand. As for me, I have found a peace I never thought possible. My own art has deepened, freed from the crushing weight of expectation and financial desperation. I even got a call from Gallery Lefebvre last week, offering me a solo show. Today, I am putting the finishing touches on a painting that will hang permanently in the foundation's entrance hall. It's a portrait of Genevieve, sitting in her favorite armchair, surrounded by her books. Her eyes, rendered in countless layers of blue and gray and silver, look directly at the viewer, wise, challenging, and filled with a fierce, unconditional love. Sometimes, the most beautiful gifts are wrapped in pain. Sometimes, the deepest wounds clear a path to our truest selves. And sometimes, it takes a moment of public humiliation to finally break the chains of expectations that were never meant for us. What about you? Has there been a person in your life who saw the real you when no one else did? Has a moment of pain ever led to unexpected growth? I would be honored to read your stories in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more stories of transformation and healing. Remember, a successful life isn't one that meets the approval of others. It's one that is authentically, courageously, and beautifully your own. Thank you for being here with me today. Until next time, may you find the strength to tell your own true story.